Okay, so if you guys need a little help on kind of getting started with the skyscraper, if you're running into any rough steps, go ahead and pay attention here for a few minutes. This will take about 10 minutes or so to go through this process. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, I created a new project, even though that we'd already started one here in the past. So I clicked on architectural oh, nope. Clicked on structural template. We'll go backwards here in just a sec. So I think it's just one of those days where things like to go just a little bit differently than how you want them to. So we're going to go to new project. We're going to click on architectural template. I think you guys are all kind of familiar with the first stage, which was creating the levels. I think everybody got through that relatively easy. I'll go ahead and do it one more time. So obviously for a skyscraper, as you guys have all read the prompts, is going to be 80 levels at 15-foot intervals. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make my first level, level 2 at 15 feet. And then from there, I'm going to click on architecture, go over to level, and click on my pick lines tool, and I'm going to make that a 15-foot offset. Okay, and you can see that when I cover my mouse over the level, it will go ahead and show me where the next level will be located. So I'm going to draw levels 1 through 10. Okay, notice that when I'm doing this, that as just kind of a refresher from the past, that we have blue level heads. You'll notice that you guys probably have blue and black level heads. If you have blue level heads, that means that your level will be in your project browser. That means that you have created a floor plan for that level. Okay. So going back, let me go back over and click on level. If you don't need a floor plan, which a lot of the times you won't need a floor plan, sometimes you just need a datum for working, you can uncheck make plan view and it will make those black level heads, and you won't get a plan view. Okay. So for what we're doing today, I obviously don't need a plan view for every single one or for all 80 levels. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create the first 10. Unfortunately, from what we've kind of figured out, when you copy the levels up by just the simple copy command, it won't make the levels in your project browser for you. Okay. So if you want actual 80 levels in your project browser, which I guess if you were doing a skyscraper and you actually were doing different levels for every, or different space plans for every level, then you might need 80 levels, and you'd have to continue just picking the lines. As laborious as that might be, you'd probably take you like a minute to do that, minute or 2 minutes. So it's not really that big of a deal. Okay, so 150 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my levels. I'm going to click on copy. I have multiple checked, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this up 150 feet. Okay, see how I'm doing that? Even though, of course, it didn't. What is this? It's not what I typed. Let's go backwards just a little bit. Let's copy this up 15 feet. Okay, let's try that one more time. So we're going to select all of our levels, click on the copy tool, and I'm going to copy this up 150 feet, 150 feet. Okay, now we're working. Now all we need is 80 levels. So that's 30. 435. So let's try 870. Oh, whoops. That was God, my math is off this morning. So 435, we're going to do 450. Probably would have been faster just to click them. So that's 60. Let's do another 450. All right. It's a lot easier for me to delete than it is to add. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these. Now we have all of our 80 levels, okay? So let's go ahead and create our massing that we're going to use for our skyscraper. So I'm going to go to level 1. I'm going to go over to massing and site. From there, I'm going to click on in place mass, okay? That will allow us to create the general mass that will be the boundary for our curtain system. So we'll call this skyscraper mass. All right. So when you initially create the mass, you kind of have to ask yourself, what is the kind of the basic shape that I'm going to use at the base of my skyscraper? For the demonstration, I'm going to keep it relatively simple. I'm just going to do a square, but you might have something a little bit different. Okay. I'm going to say my skyscraper has a 100-foot by 100-foot base. Okay, so I'm going to draw just the basic boundary of that. All right, so 100-foot by 100-foot. From there, I'm going to go ahead and hit escape, and I'm going to click on that shape. Notice that I have one single boundary that surrounds that massing. Okay, so I'm going to click on that mass, and then from there, I'm going to go up to Create Form, and I'm going to click on Solid Form. So that will turn the 2D shape that you just created into a 3-dimensional object. All right. So now, if I go to my 3D view, you can actually start to see that 2D shape now be in 3D. Okay. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and select the top of my mass. Notice that I could select the individual faces. Okay. I could select the individual faces. I can select the edges, and I can also select the points or the interstices of the different line segments. Okay, I know my skyscraper is I think it's 1,185 feet tall, so I'm going to select the height right here, 1,185, enter, and that will give us basically a 1,000-foot extruded shape that we're looking for. Okay, from here I'll let you guys kind of determine what the shape or the profile of your skyscraper might be. Feel free to experiment by kind of manipulating some of the edges. You might manipulate a few of these edges to kind of get kind of a unique skyscraper shape. Okay. Another thing that you could try is you could try to, let me click on a top here. You could click on Add Profile. You can also click on Add Edges. That will give you additional line segments on the faces of your mass to be able to push and pull. Okay, so for example, let's just try Add Profile. I'm going to add a profile to about the middle of my building. And what that does is now when you click on one of those edges and you move it, let's say either in or out, it basically uses that profile as a pivot point. Okay, for maybe a curved edge. Okay, so we'll say that that's going to be my skyscraper. I'm going to have straight edges on, or all straight edges on all three of my sides, except for one side I'll have a very subtle curve. Okay, so we'll leave it relatively simple. So from there, now that I have my massing, I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish Mass. Okay. So now notice that I can click on the mass as a whole versus the edges. If you want to go back and edit your mass, you can click on Edit in Place, and you're right back into that same mode where you can start to do some pushing and pulling. Okay, so I'm going to click on Finish Mass. I'm now going to click on the mass, and to create our floors, you can go ahead and click on Mass Floors, and that will give you the option to check all of the floors that you want to mass. Okay, so I'm going to click on Level 1, scroll down to the very bottom. I'm holding down Shift. I'm going to click on all levels through. I'm going to click on level 80, and that will select everything in between. And then from there, I can just click on one of the boxes on the left-hand side, and that will select all of them. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And Revit will mass all of the floors for you. All right. So even though this masked the floors, this is just a massing. This is not a physical floor. Okay. There's no substance to that. There's no dimension to it besides a single plane. Okay. To actually obtain actual floors, I'm going to go to Architecture, and I'm going to click on Floor by Face. Okay. From there, I can select what kind of a floor I want. I'm going to click on 3-inch lightweight concrete on 2-inch metal deck. That's probably fairly similar to what they would use for a skyscraper. They might use like 4-inch metal deck though. Surprisingly, even those floors in a skyscraper, they're relatively thin. They're maybe 4 to 6 inches thick. All right, so I'm going to we'll just click on that one. That'll work for what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and select all of all my floors. Okay, you don't need to select them one by one, like I know I saw some people doing. You can select all of your floors. Oops, sorry. Let me go back to Floor by Face. I'm going to select all of my my masked floors, click on the floor type that I want, and then I'm then going to click on create floor. Okay, so now I actually have floors that have some thickness to them, okay? And that is what I want, all right? So the next step to creating your skyscraper is going to be to define a curtain grid system, okay? So we're gonna actually start to define a spacing or kind of a mullion system that we want to use, all right? So I'm going to click on curtain system, and then I'm going to select the faces of your mass that you want to create a curtain system for. So I'm going to select all four faces, okay? So I've selected all 4 faces of my mass, and then I'm going to click on create system. But before I do that, we're going to define a few things over in our curtain system. So by default, Revit gives you this curtain system called the 5x10 grid system, which is just a 5-foot by 10-foot grid. That may be what you want, but I've noticed that when you actually have a curved surface in your massing, that it doesn't always place it properly. It kind of sometimes will put it at an angle, and to be honest, it gets kind of annoying. So I'm going to show you another way, and that's more of a manual process, which is kind of nice. It takes a little bit more time, but it allows you to be much more precise with where you place your curtain grids. Okay, so I'm going to create a new system. I'm going to hit duplicate. I'm going to call this no grid. Hit OK, and I'm going to change the grid 1 and grid 2 spacing to none. Change that to none. And I'm not going to define any mullions at this point. Okay, I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to click on Create System. All right, so it doesn't look like anything happened, but it actually did. You do have, if you click on this, you'll notice that we have a curtain grid system here. Basically, we've put a giant sheet of glass to surround all 4 sides of our building. Okay, so from here, I can now go in and start to define what my grid is going to be. Okay, knowing that I have 15-foot intervals, I'm going to go over to architecture. I'm then going to click on curtain grid. Okay, and notice that when I hover my mouse over the edges of my curtain grid system, I will get a dashed line that represents where that grid line will be. Keep in mind that when you place the grid line, you're not placing a mullion. Okay, you're just placing the grid line, which will be used to place the mullion. Okay, so I'm going to say that my grid system, just like we did before, I'm going to say 10-foot floor to ceiling glass, and then I'm going to have 5 feet of something else. I'm not going to go as far as defining what that panel is, but just like the Villa Savoie, remember when we created that door that had that curved door, and we changed the panels of that to be that green panel instead of glass? You could take that same approach here to where you actually have glass maybe in that 10-foot interval, and then you could actually change that band to a different type of system. You could change it to like a spandrel glass system that's not actually see-through, or you could change it to like, people put like Alucobond metal panels. There's, possibilities are endless. You can make it, basically the point is you can make it some other type of material. Okay, so I've defined a grid both at 10 and 5 feet. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over on the other sides. Okay, so let's see. Sometimes it's a little finicky. Oh, there, come back, come on. Oh, there it is. I don't know why it's not giving me my dimension. All right, so I have something kind of like that. All right, I'm going to make this 5 feet to match my first one I did. Click on that grid. Let's make that 5 feet like my first one. Of course, this one doesn't want to give me a dimension. Why aren't you giving me a dimension? Okay, I'm just going to kind of eyeball that. Okay, so from here, I can go ahead and let me click on curtain grid system again. Notice that when I move my mouse over to the bottom of my grid, that my grids now become vertical. okay? So if you want to start to create a vertical system, you could do that. All right, like I said earlier, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of eyeball this for now, just to kind of keep this relatively simple. But you could click on these and copy them over and make sure that you have a nice even system. That would be relatively easy, okay? For now, I'm just going to eyeball it so I can go a little bit quicker. All right, so I'm going to define those vertical grid lines. Da, 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 da. Okay, so those are our vertical grid lines. From here, if you want to repeat that initial horizontal grid pattern that we had just created, I'm going to go ahead and select all of my horizontal grids that I just created. Okay, so that's 6, 7, 8. Okay, so it's right over here in my properties palette that I've selected 8 grids. Okay, so we've done the right thing. I'm going to go ahead and click on copy to clipboard. All right, so remember that we're creating the first initial module, okay? We're not gonna create every one from there on up. We're just gonna create the first one that we want, whatever spacing that might be, and then we're gonna go to copy to clipboard and we're gonna align it to all the selected levels, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and select all 80 levels. I'm gonna hit okay. Just give it a minute or two, and it will copy that horizontal grid structure that you just created to all of your levels, okay? So it's much nicer to put the time and the effort to creating that initial module to make sure that's correct and it's the distance that you want. So if it takes a little extra time, it's okay, because it's much easier to create the rest than it is to think of that initial one that you want.
Even though it takes a minute to copy it over.
Yeah, but at least it's effortless. It's effortless.
Yeah, it's just
time. You can drink your coffee and just let it kind of happen. So you're probably going to get some kind of an error. It's saying that some of the grid lines didn't quite place the way that Revit wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. You have no other option, so that's what's going to happen. Usually it happens. It's just telling you that maybe that a grid line didn't place properly, probably on the curve, is my guess. Okay, we'll deal with whatever that was later.
So then when you place the mullions, you gotta just do them one at a time, or is there a way to do all of them?
Good question. Let's kind of see how that might work. Okay, so I'm going to continue to use this side over here for demonstration purposes. Okay, so from there you can click on mullion. All right, and you can define what kind of mullion you want. You might use a smaller mullion, you might use a larger mullion, completely up to you. So I'm going to click on 2.5 by 5, maybe for my verticals, okay? So I'm going to kind of take this the slow process. Notice there's a button called All Grid Lines, okay? So notice that, yes, you could select all of your grid lines and you'll get that mullion system for all of your grid lines. The problem is, no, it's doing all of them. So to answer your question, you might break it up into stages, okay? So you might do just your verticals at one point. Then you might do, maybe this mullion right here wants to be like a really thick mullion. Maybe the one below is a little bit thinner. So you might break it up into creating certain groups of mullions so that you can use the all grid line tool. Otherwise, right now, if I click on this, I'm going to have that 2.5-inch mullion on the entire building, which I don't want. I probably want some kind of a hierarchy of mullion sizes. They probably all have different functions as well. So that is an option, yes. But in order to kind of get what you want, you'll probably have to break it into.
So then would you select, like say you want them thicker to height the floor, would you build one and then paste it at every level?
Exactly. Okay, so let's say you wanted thinner. Oops, I just did that. So I'm going to click on grid line, just one grid line. Maybe I want thinner mullions for my verticals. Okay, so we have thinner lines for our verticals. Maybe you have a really thick one on the corners. I'm just going to do this for now, just for simplicity purposes. Okay, and so as we were just saying, maybe we want a really thick mullion to kind of hide some of that floor structure. Okay, so I'm going to Duplicate this. Maybe that mullion is, we'll say 5 by 12. So 5 inch by 12 inch. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. And let's make this 6 inches on one side of the grid line and 6 inches on the other. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. And from there, I can go ahead and click on that grid line that is on my, oh, maybe it didn't make that one. Oh, yeah, that was my error message. It didn't give me that. I'll come back and figure out why that happened there in a few minutes. But you should at least understand that now, that you can go and start to kind of define how you're going to define different types of grids. Okay. So any questions about grids? Is that pretty clear? So it could be kind of as quick or as laborious of a process that you want, really. It's definitely a lot easier to kind of break them up into modules. Maybe you do all your verticals first, then you figure out what type of mullion you want for your verticals. You can use the all grids tool, and then you can select all of your verticals at one time. Then you can go and define what that next horizontal grid is, and you can start to break them up from there. All right, so that would probably take me about 10-15 minutes to go ahead and define what all of those grids are. I'm not going to do that here right in front of you, but that should certainly give you what you need to be able to finish the project. The goal is to figure out what that grid system is going to be. Don't take too much time on this. As I mentioned earlier, it's not supposed to be a design project like our villa. Spend about half an hour, 45 minutes on the project, turn it in, move on. Okay, all you're going to need to do is to create an elevation. So that might be one of my elevations, and then I would probably do another one for this side. Place those onto a sheet along with a rendering of some sort. Okay, you could do this in realistic. Let me click on real. There we go. All right, so right now my building is kind of purple. If I select the entire building, I can click on filter, and I'm going to uncheck everything but massings. Okay, I don't need my mass anymore. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and now you have just floor, metal deck, concrete, and glass and mullions. Okay, so essentially that's kind of what you're after. Obviously, I haven't placed a majority of my mullions yet, but if I spend about 15 more minutes, I could have a fairly complete looking skyscraper. Okay, and that's the main objective of this critical thinking exercise, is to know that you can create something of this size relatively quickly. I just created what we have here in about 10 minutes, and I could probably finish the general massing in about 20 minutes. So it's not too bad. Any questions before we move on? Good? Okay.